Now, All Things Real Estate continues on Full Service Radio, 830 WCRN. Once again, here's your hosts, Gary Keley and Brad Avergon.
All right, we're back to All Things Real Estate. I'm Gary Keley with Lamakia Realty, and I'm joined by Brad Avergon with Fairway Mortgage. Brad, have you figured out why Fairway is called Fairway?
I'm working on it. I'll have that for you for your next show.
All right. That's fine. So we were talking about valuing a house. And even if you have a certified appraiser go out, the next certified appraiser could give a different value.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's really important that people understand that going in, because sometimes we do have to adjust values a little bit. And even to appraisals, you can have an appraisal that's done, 60 days apart or even 30 days apart, and maybe a new comparable pops up and that changes the value of the appraisal a little bit. So you have to be flexible with regard to that. And if you're dealing with two parties that are maybe not having great communications, sometimes that has to go through the attorneys. But understand
the other thing that I find is that people need to talk about what needs to be done to the house to prepare it for marketing. And even in this, even in this market, sellers will get greater value if they do certain things to make the house appear better. Okay. In some cases, it's a coat of paint. In some cases, it's throwing some cement around that loose brick in the walkway. A bunch of different things, all cosmetic. I tell people, don't spend a pile of money, because you're going to get more or less 50 cents back on the dollar on a lot of that stuff. So when people come to me and say, oh, we've got to replace all the carpeting in the house. Well, is the carpet really worn out, or is it just uglied out? And there's a difference, because if it's just ugly, then clean it. And it doesn't have to be replaced. If it's threadbare, really worn out, then that may be a case where it makes sense to replace the carpet. So deciding what improvements to do is another thing. And then how do you fund those improvements?
Well, that's a great point, Gary. And, one of the things, again, it goes to that heart of cooperation. One of the things that they can do, if depending on how much money they have to work with, liquid cash, to fund those improvements, they can either use those funds, or if they don't have a lot of funds, while they are still legally married, and if they're in agreement that they're going to sell the property and they need some liquidity to fix those up, they can, either, if they have an existing equity line, they can use that to tap some of those repairs and improvements, or they can get an equity line, and take care of those things so that they both win, right? If they make those improvements, hopefully the house will sell for more, and they'll be able to share in that equity.
Some real estate companies will actually front some of those expenditures. If there's equity in the house and it's something that you can see a direct relationship between the improvement and the sale price, there are a number of firms out there that actually front the money, and then that helps move the house along more quickly. No question about it.
Yeah. One thing, Gary, that I do want to bring up, and this is a very common thing that I do come up against, is with regard to the credit. Sometimes if it's a difficult divorcing situation, one party who may be responsible for paying a mortgage bill or a home insurance bill or anything, any credit in general, if they, they'll say, well, I'm not, this is a joint obligation. I'm not paying my half, or I'm not paying the bill, and I'm going to let it go. We'll work it out in divorce court. And really what that does is it really hurts both parties. It messes up their credit. It can actually, if they don't make their mortgage payment, it can stop them from being able to move on and get another property and move on to a new mortgage. And so, I do want to share that with our listeners and viewers, because nobody wins in that situation. As best you can, just try to get along and make sure that all of those credit payments are paid in a timely fashion, specifically the mortgages and the insurance and all of those other things, so that when the dust clears from this pending divorce situation, everybody's got their best shot to move forward with their lives.
Yeah, one of the things that we're seeing is even on rentals, a lot of times we take a look at the credit of someone, And if their credit has been, in my words, trashed through the divorce process, it can be difficult even finding a rental to move into.
Absolutely, Gary.
The rental market, on a limited basis, I'm seeing some folks that are offering over asking for a rental because it's such a heated environment. And if your credit is trashed, that's not going to help, not at all.
And what a lot of people don't realize, Gary, is that they may have been a cosigner on a credit card that they don't even remember that they co-signed for. And if one of the parties just basically defaults on that card or has many lates going into it, it's going to stay with them on their credit, and it can really, really make them get them in trouble. So one of the prudent things to do when preparing for a divorce maybe would be to pull your own credit. There's no charge for that. It does not impact your credit scores when you pull it yourself. People can go on freecreditreport.com and take a look at their credit and see what is in their name. And very often they're surprised that they've got either cards that they're an authorized user on, or their cards that are in their name they didn't even know about, that may or may not have balances that they may or may not know about. I've seen that many, many times. And, understand that, I've had people approach me before, understand that you can't say as an excuse, well, I went through a difficult divorce, this is where my credit is trashy. And my scores are below a certain level. That's not going to be an acceptable excuse for a bank, although it's real and it's sad. That's not going to be enough to turn the situation around. You're going to be in a difficult situation where, as you said, you may not be able to even get a rental.
Right. It is interesting to see people start to stick their head out and look at what they can get for the next time. I am divorced, and when I was divorcing. My divorce attorney looked at me and he said a couple of things. You've got kids, you're going to be married to her forever, which is true. And he also said, no one gets wealthy in a divorce. And at the end of the day, the pile's only so big and it gets split certain ways. And it's just that simple. So it can be eye-opening for someone to go out and start to try to find either a home or a rental and see what they're capable of affording. And, I continue to say that loan officers, present company excluded, will give you a mortgage pre-approval or pre-qualification for more than you might want to spend on a regular basis. So I tell people, it's great that you got that pre-approval for $500,000, but if you don't think you can afford that payment and you're not comfortable with it, then don't do it. Get to a product that will allow you to do what you want to do right now.
Absolutely, Gary. I couldn't agree with that more. And what's more is, especially people coming out of a divorce, they may not be used to the change in cash flow. And what I mean by that is, if one party has been, let's say they've been paying the whole mortgage payment, they've been paying all the taxes, the housing expense, and all of a sudden they're going to be saddled with an alimony and child support payment, that's a big change in their cash flow. They may not be able to have as big a mortgage as they had before because the change is going to be so different. And that's the kind of conversations that we have. The other thing is, if we have one party that's going to be staying in the house, maybe for children, maybe they don't need to have a 30-year fixed product on it. I recently did a loan for somebody who was, again, going to be paying out, and their cash flow was a big concern. And what I was able to do is put them into an adjustable rate mortgage that was fixed for like 7 years, which was enough time for the kids to go through school, graduate, go through college, and then they planned on selling the house. So a lot of those types of conversations come into what I do, and we discuss it so that I can try to reduce the cash outflow for them as much as possible. The other point I want to bring up too, and this is something I was stunned when I heard this, a divorce attorney, not one that I work with, this was somebody I don't work with, but once told a client that if they didn't want to make their mortgage payment because it was a very difficult divorce, a very bitter divorce, and they were trying to give the gotcha to the other person. The divorce attorney told their client that if they put their mortgage payments into a specific account and not pay the mortgage payment because they want to hold it out to the end, and they just deposit it into that account, that won't hold it against them. And I not only did I counsel the client that was not the case, but I had to counsel the attorney and say, that is not the case. And you can't be providing that kind of information because it's erroneous. And it, in fact, in this case, hurt that client's ability to get a mortgage.
Yeah, I think that, you go through the continued steps of decluttering the house. You're going to get an offer. That's another point of contention because the offer may or may not be what they expect. And so I think the house is worth 700,000. Well, the offer is for 650. We thought it was going to be worth somewhere in the 650 range. And that's a point of disconnect. It does get back to, even though you're divorcing, you do still need to work together and have some conversations.
Absolutely.
And, it's fine if people want to have their divorce attorneys run interference for them and take care of all that. My personal experience is that costs a lot of money. No offense to divorce attorneys, but their meters run quickly. And, I do think it's important to have an attorney representing the legal part of the divorce where you deal with the emotional part, because, it's difficult on its best day.
Sure. Absolutely.
So the other thing, Brad, is as people go out, it's, sometimes people look at that and say it's a new start. It's a fresh beginning. I can go live in Medway, where I've lived in Framingham forever, and I want to try something different. I think that's, trying to look at a negative and make it a positive. I think that's a key thing. I think divorce is painful, but I'm also aware that if someone's in an abusive relationship, sometimes divorce is liberating. And so there are two sides to those kinds of discussions.
I would agree. And I think that, most people, I don't think anybody goes into a marriage saying, we're going to get divorced. Everybody goes into a marriage with good times, good intentions, and hopefully there's some love there. And I think that, at some point, part of what we do is like, okay, this didn't work out, but there was something there. Now you're going to open up a new chapter in your life where good things can happen again. And I think keeping that in focus with the clients is really important, because, as you said, it is hard to kind of sell the marital home. There's a lot of stuff, maybe they raise kids in the marital home. So there's a lot of emotional pain that goes with that. And so pointing out that there's a bright light, that this, maybe this is built up over a long period of time, and now you're going to turn a corner where you can really have some happiness again. I think that's important.
Speaking of bright lights, I see a bright light in our future here. I think that's probably the end of the show. If someone wanted to reach you, Brad, how would they do that?
The best way to reach me, Gary, is via my cell phone, which is 978-375-5531, or via email, which is Brad at I gave a different email address last time, but you can use either one, brad@bradavergon.com. And Gary, how do they reach you?
I haven't changed anything. So it's 508-733-6005. And it's Gary at movewithgary.com. I want to thank Keith. I want to thank Harry. I want to thank Ted A. And I want to thank you, Brad, for participating in the show this marvelous day.
Absolutely, Gary. Have a wonderful day and be well.
You've been listening to All Things Real Estate on Full Service Radio, 830 WCRN.